Jon Snow stood alone on Winterfell's eastern battlements, the chill air nipping at the edges of his wool cloak. Snowflakes drifted lazily from a pewter sky, settling on the shaggy white fur of Ghost at his side. Below, the courtyard was hushed save for the muted clang of distant hammers and the crunch of boots across fresh snow. Everywhere, Winterfell breathed its ancient life. Steam curling from the hot spring runnels, smoke twisting from mead hall chimneys, banners snapping in the wind like half-remembered songs. Jon felt it all as a stern heartbeat beneath his boots. Steady, unhurried, eternal. Yet tonight that pulse carried something restless, as though the stones themselves whispered secrets he had no words for. He turned from the parapet and started down the narrow stair, Ghost padding silent as moonlight behind him. Snow melted under iron braziers, leaving slick patches on the steps. Jon moved with the ease of long habit, one hand on the damp cold rail. Even so, his mind wandered. Maester Luwin's letters had arrived at dusk. Reports of uneasy lords, of risen taxes and southern squabbles. Robb had pored over each scroll by firelight, jaw set, shoulders rigid beneath his doublet. Yet it was Jon who felt the heavier weight, because he could not share in Robb's burdens, nor escape them. Bastard, the walls seemed to breathe. Ghost nuzzled his fingers in wordless comfort, and Jon scratched behind the direwolf's ear. Whatever Luwin's parchments foretold, Winterfell endured. He would endure beside it. As he crossed the quiet training yard, Jon's thoughts drifted toward the crypts. He had not visited Ned Stark's tomb since the New Year's feast, but tonight an urge tugged like a hook behind his sternum. Perhaps it was the gray sky, or the taste of snow on his tongue, or simply a memory of his father's voice, gentle yet grave, once guiding him through those dark stone halls. Ghost cocked his head, amber eyes reflecting torchlight, then trotted ahead, as though the wolf, too, sensed a summons from beneath the earth. The entrance yawned at the yard's far edge, flanked by granite direwolves whose muzzles were sheathed in rime. Jon lifted a torch from its sconce, the flame sputtering in the wind, and descended the worn steps. Immediately the world contracted. The hush deepened. The smell of cold stone and old earth enveloped him. Footfalls echoed between vaulted pillars carved with dire wolves and storm kings and the faded sigils of forgotten Stark cousins. On either side, stone monarchs slumbered upon their sepulchres, swords crossed over marble knees, as though in vigil against some foe who might one day follow Jon into the dark. He passed his grandfather's likeness, lean and stern, and the smaller sarcophagus of Brandon Stark, carved with laughter lines that no sculptor's chisel could dampen. Jon paused before Lady's empty alcove. No statue, only a blank niche where sorrow still ached like a half-healed wound. Ghost whined softly, brushing Jon's calf with his muzzle, and the two moved on, down the steps, until the air turned damp and a thin mist curled around Jon's ankles. Cobwebs fluttered in the torch's wake, silver nets trembling at his breath. He stopped at the last landing and lifted the flame. Beyond, a short corridor ended in blank stone. No sarcophagus, no effigy, nothing but roughly hewn bricks that looked newer than the rest. Jon frowned. He had walked these crypts 100 times with Bran and Arya, listened to old Nan's ghost stories, memorized each alcove and kingly statue, yet he had never noticed this wall. The stones were mismatched, their mortar gray instead of soot dark, and a chill draft seeped through unseen seams. Ghost padded forward, nose working, hackles rising like frost-brittle thistles. Jon's breath clouded the torchlight. He set the flame in a rusted ring on the wall and pressed his palm to the stone. Cold, damp, but beneath his fingers, one brick shifted ever so slightly. Jon inhaled, wedged his gloves into the crack, and pulled. Dust billowed. Mortar crumbled. The brick slid free with a hollow rasp. Behind it, darkness gaped. A hidden chamber. Why would Father keep such a secret? Jon's pulse quickened. He reached into the aperture, tugged loose a second brick, then a third. Soon he had carved a narrow opening wide enough to squeeze through. Torch in hand, he ducked, Ghost slipping in at his heels. The space beyond was small, scarcely larger than a horse stall. Its walls were rough bedrock, unshaped by mason's tools, and the air smelled of damp clay mixed with something older. Sulfur, perhaps, or scorched metal. At the center sat a stone pedestal no higher than Jon's knee. Upon it lay an object swaddled in half-rotted velvet, the cloth embroidered with faint threads of gold that caught the torch's tremulous light. Each breath Jon drew seemed to crackle in his lungs. He knelt, hands trembling, and peeled the brittle fabric away. Beneath lay an egg the size of a man's helmet, its shell wrought in overlapping scales like a knight's mail. Colors shifted beneath the grime, deepest emerald veined with flecks of black and sunlit gold. The shell hummed beneath his fingertips, subtle, like a pulse buried far beneath skin. Alive. A dragon egg. Jon swallowed. His mind reeled through half-remembered tales. The doom of Valyria, the conquest, the hatching of Dany's brood across the narrow sea. 3 dragons soared again under a Targaryen queen. Yet here, in the frozen bowels of Winterfell, another waited in silence. How long had it slept? Who had hidden it and why? Thoughts clashed like swords, but one truth rang clearer than a horn at dawn. This secret could topple kingdoms. Ghost circled the pedestal, nose close to the shell, tail lashing in wary fascination. A faint warmth radiated, like coals banked under ash, and as Jon watched, a sigh rippled across the scales. A shimmer of green gold that died almost as soon as it appeared. His heart hammered. A living creature slumbered inside, waiting for flame or blood or some other magic. Winterfell had neither pyres nor dragon lords, only cold hearths and colder duty. Yet the egg had called to him tonight, through stone and storm and the hush of falling snow. He gathered the relic in both hands. It was heavier than any talon he'd gripped in the practice yard, yet delicate as a promise. The scales were smooth but not slick, each ridge fitting his palm like long familiar armor. Jon closed his eyes. "Father, what did you mean me to do with this?" But silence was his only answer, broken by the soft pop of torch pitch. Securing the egg beneath the folds of his cloak, Jon backed from the hidden niche and replaced the bricks as best he could. His gloves smeared mortar. Dust coated his sleeves. When he stepped onto the stair, the crypt's gloom felt sharper, charged, as though every stone visage watched with newly opened eyes. He extinguished the torch, cradled the egg against his chest, and ascended the winding steps, Ghost ushering him with quiet urgency. Snow greeted him at the courtyard entrance, swirling quicksilver under lantern glow. It was late, past the hour of the owl, but the watch changed on the outer wall, and a pair of stable hands laughed softly near the smithy. Jon slipped through shadows, heart pounding not with fear but wonder. In his chambers atop the armory stair, a single candle guttered beside frozen window panes. He laid the egg upon his cot of furs and blankets, watching colors glimmer in the wavering light. Sleep proved impossible. He paced the small room, hands clasped behind his back, mind ablaze with questions. Sam would know 100 theories from dusty tomes. Luwin would recall crumbled scrolls from the Age of Heroes. Even Stannis, brooding in Dragonstone's abandoned halls, might whisper counsel. But Jon had no Sam, no maester, no king at hand. Only Ghost, sprawled by the hearth, ears twitching to unheard rhythms. At dawn's first gray blush, Jon wrapped the egg in soft linen, cinched it beneath his cloak, and strode for the rookery. Luwin met him at the tower door, cheeks flushed by the climb, owl-eyed with surprise. Jon spoke little, only that a matter of old Stark history needed study, that scrolls on Valyrian relics would help. The maester blinked but asked no questions. He had long since learned the weight of secrets in a lord's house. While Luwin rummaged through pigeon-pecked shelves, Jon hurried to the godswood. Red leaves fluttered like blood-stained parchment across the snow-blanketed ground. He knelt before the heart tree, the carved weirwood face glowering in silent judgment. Jon set the egg upon a bed of fallen crimson leaves and bowed his head. The stillness enveloped him. Wind sighed through high branches. A raven croaked once from the boughs. In that hush, Jon whispered a prayer, not to the old gods alone, but to whatever fate watched from beyond the wall, beyond Dragonfire. beyond blood. A tremor answered. It ran up his fingers, through the egg's shell. A subtle quiver like a heartbeat stirring from deep slumber. Light flickered across the scales, green brightening to gold, then fading. Ghost whined low, fur bristling. Jon's breath caught. No sword had ever leapt so thrillingly in his grasp. No victory on the training yard had summoned such fierce elation. This was life itself awakening beneath his hands. He clutched the egg to his chest. A plan began to form, not in words, but in instincts honed by ice and oath. Keep it secret, keep it safe, learn its needs. Fire and blood were the stuff of Targaryen legend. Here in the north, he had plenty of one and none of the other. Yet perhaps the gods had other paths. Dragons had slept in stone before. Perhaps this one would wake to frost. For days that stretched like seasons, Jon balanced duty and clandestine care. He attended Robb's councils, trained new recruits, patrolled the walls, all while the egg warmed beneath layered furs near his hearth. At night, he read crumbling pages borrowed from the library. Accounts of Aegon's conquest, of Archmaester Marwyn's dragon lore, of eggs turned to stone when magic fled the world. Each shard of lore carried contradictions. Heat kindled life, yet too much scorched it. Blood called to dragons, yet blood spilled in vein bred only ghosts. On the seventh night, as the moon rose thin as a sliver of milk glass, a hairline crack traced across one emerald scale. Jon, dozing in a chair, sprang awake as Ghost loosed a guttural growl. The crack yawned wider, glowing from within. A faint chirrup, like the peep of a hatchling sparrow, echoed in the chamber. Jon's heart stuttered. He knelt, hand hovering over the shell, terrified to break what nature had begun. The room smelled suddenly of brimstone and spring grass. Cracks webbed the shell in golden latticework. Chips flaked off, revealing damp onyx membranes. The chirrup turned to a tiny hiss. In a final convulsion, the shell split, the glow winked out, and a small, sinewy creature tumbled into Jon's trembling hands. It was no larger than a kitten, yet every inch spoke of ancient majesty. Wings folded tight against a serpentine body, talons like obsidian thorns, eyes milky and opaque. Green scales darkened toward sapphire along the spine, each edged in pale gold. Steam curled from its nostrils as it shivered, slick with fluids. Jon exhaled a laugh half made of tears. He wrapped the hatchling in his cloak's fur lining, crooning nonsense sounds while Ghost sniffed close, tail wagging in awed confusion. "I'll keep you safe," Jon whispered, voice thick. "By ice and fire, I swear it." The hatchling's eyes blinked, pupils slitting to vertical knives. A soft chuff escaped its throat, a sound like embers stirred beneath a forge bellows. It nuzzled Jon's thumb, tiny teeth pressing but not breaking skin, and settled into the crook of his arm as though it had known him all its short life. With dawn came new dilemmas. A dragon could not remain hidden forever. It would grow, learn to flame, to fly. Winterfell's bones might shelter it for a time, but sooner or later wings would darken northern skies, and every bannerman in the realm would feel the tremor of old Valyria reborn. Jon paced his chambers, the hatchling clinging to his shoulder like a featherless hawk. If Robb knew, he would protect Jon as fiercely as any brother. But Robb was Lord Stark now, entangled in duty and the eyes of lords who feared anything Targaryen. Catelyn's distrust would chill matters further, and Theon's tongue wagged loose whenever cups were poured. No, secrecy remained their only shield. He moved quietly through days, stealing morsels of charred meat from the kitchens, coaxing timid flames from the hatchling's small lungs. Luwin raised an eyebrow at singed parchments but said nothing. Ghost accepted the fledgling without protest, lying beside Jon's feet while scales rubbed against direwolf fur in mute companionship. Some nights Jon dreamed of snowbound skies torn by jade wings, of frozen lakes melting under dragonfire, of men bowing to a king whose cloak bore both direwolf and dragon. He woke each time with heart thundering and the hatchling blinking up at him, wide-eyed, as though it saw the same visions in the flicker of dying coals. Weeks passed, and Winterfell stirred with talk of war. The Iron Throne's levies bled the south, King Robert's drunken letters grew slurred and spiteful. Whispers of Queen Cersei's schemes crawled north like ice spiders. Robb walked the ramparts at night, jaw clenched, hand on sword pommel. Jon accompanied him often, the hatchling tucked beneath wool and leather, its warmth a constant reminder that power slept against his ribs. One windless evening, Robb halted at the edge of the Godswood Bridge, staring south. "Sometimes I think Father left us more puzzles than answers," he muttered. "All those talks of honor. What good is honor when a kingdom rots from its own heart?" Jon's gaze slipped to the dark trees, their red leaves rustling like restless ghosts. "I don't know," he said quietly, "but I believe Father trusted us to find the answers ourselves." Robb offered half a smile, weary and uncertain. "I hope you're right, brother." He clapped Jon's shoulder, felt the concealed bulk beneath the cloak, and paused. Before he could question, a horn sounded from the outer gate, and duty drew him away. That night Jon sat alone before his hearth, watching the hatchling chase sparks across the flagstones. It had doubled in size since hatching, wings stretching the length of Jon's forearm, eyes bright as wildfire caught in emerald glass. He fed it morsels of venison, then settled it atop a curved iron perch he had fashioned in the forge. Flames reflected off its scales, painting the walls in green-gold ripples. "How long can I hide you?" Jon whispered. The dragon cocked its head, smoke furling from its nostrils, as though pondering the same riddle. A soft knock disturbed the quiet. Jon rose, heart fevered, and cracked the door. Samwell Tarly, cheeks flushed from the climb, stood there clutching a bundle of scrolls. "Maester Luwin said you'd want these tonight," Sam mumbled. I didn't mean to intrude, but..." His eyes drifted past Jon's shoulder. Dragonfire glimmered in the chamber, a flicker of emerald that widened Sam's gaze to full moon circles. He squeaked, stepped back, nearly dropped his bundle. Jon grabbed his friend's sleeve, hauled him inside, shut the door. "Quiet," he hissed. Ghost rose, hackles half lifted, amber stare fixed on Sam. The dragon clambered down from its perch, wings rustling like parchment, and peered curiously at the newcomer. What is?" Sam gulped. "7 save us, Jon. That's a dragon," Jon finished, voice low. "Yes, and our lives depend on keeping it secret." Sam blinked sweat from his lashes. "Does Robb know?" "Not yet." Sam's hands trembled around the scrolls. He swallowed again, drew a slow breath, and met Jon's gaze. "All right," he said. "I'll help." Relief flooded Jon's limbs. He clasped Sam's shoulder. "Thank you." They spent hours poring over dragon lore by candle glow, hatching rituals, feeding schedules, accounts of Aegon's sisters flying beyond the wall. The hatchling dozed beside Ghost, tail coiled, occasional sparks escaping its jaw. Outside, Winterfell slept under a hush of snow, ignorant of the inferno now nurtured within its heart. Days slid into months, and the dragon, whom Jon quietly named Frostfire, grew. Its wings thickened with muscle, its hide deepened to forest green mottled like winter pine, and its breath, once a meager puff, now flashed in short cones of ghost green flame capable of blackening iron. Jon trained it at dawn in the vacant yard by the burned library, coaxing short glides between parapets, hiding scorch marks beneath fresh snow drifts before guards mustered. Sam crafted leather wrappings to muffle talon clack on stone. Ghost served as silent sentinel against spies. Still, whispers began. Distant fires in abandoned crofts east of the King's Road, shepherds claiming to see a green comet dive behind Winterfell's walls. Robb dismissed them as drink-soaked fancies, yet tension coiled like wire in Jon's gut. On the eve of Greyjoy raids along the stony shore, a raven arrived from King's Landing. Ned Stark accused of treason, detained at court. Robb summoned bannermen, wore banners unfurled from towers like streaks of blood. Steel sang in the courtyard all day, and plans were laid to march south. Catelyn's tears froze upon her cheeks even in the heat of the great hall hearth. Jon watched chaos thicken around him and knew the time for secrecy waned. Night fell heavy. In his chambers, Frostfire spread half-grown wings across the rafters, ember eyes reflecting candlelight. Jon packed a saddlebag with smoked mutton, salted beef, charcoaled logs, and 2 books on dragon husbandry. Sam stood by the door, lantern in hand, round face wan. Ghost paced restless. "Are you sure?"
Sam whispered.
Jon cinched the bag. "If father lives, Robb will need every sword and more. A dragon could end this war before it begins." "A dragon half-grown," Sam cautioned. "Can it fly beyond Winterfell?" Jon glanced at the perch where Frostfire tightened talons. "Not yet, so I ride south. When it's ready, it will follow." He stroked the dragon's scaled jaw. Warmth pulsed beneath his palm. "I feel it. We're bound." Sam's eyes glistened, but he nodded. "I'll cover your absence. Right when you can." Jon gripped his friend's forearm, gratitude unspoken, then lifted Frostfire in both arms. The dragon's wings wrapped around his shoulders like living velvet. Its claws flexed into the hide of Jon's cloak. He eased down the shadowed stairwell, through postern doors, into the gods' wood one last time. Beneath the heart tree he swore a vow to bring his father home, to guard the north, to wield ice and fire as one. Hooves crunched frozen ground as Jon guided his mare from the stables before dawn. No trumpet hailed his departure. Only the hushed whisper of falling snow and the throb of dragon heat against his breast. At the King's Road's mouth he turned, casting one final glance at Winterfell's gray silhouette. Frostfire poked its head from Jon's cloak, eyes glowing like twin jade coals. Ghost sat beside the gate, tail sweeping snow, howl caught silent in his throat. Jon touched 2 gloved fingers to his brow in farewell, then nudged the mare south. The road stretched blank and silent ahead, its promise edged with peril and purpose. In the hush before sunrise, the first distant wing beats shivered the air, too soft for any ear but Jon's. He smiled, heart fierce. The song of ice and fire had begun anew, and in its first verse rode a bastard, a dire wolf, and the last green flame of dragons. The mare's hoe. Oves drummed a steady cadence along the King's Road, unhurried yet relentless, snow hissing beneath iron shoes as the path wound southward between drifts taller than a man's waist. Dawn had scarcely lifted above the wolfswood, and already a fretful wind combed the treetops, sighing through brittle pine boughs like some ancient thing too weary for speech. Jon rode cloaked in grays and black, his face cowled deep, the better to hide the faint steam curling from the folds of fur against his breast. Frostfire nestled there, wings tucked tight, tail looped round Jon's ribs, still a creature no larger than a barn cat, but heavier each sunrise, his body warm as a banked forge and thrumming with quiet power. They made what haste they could, but haste was a fickle ally. Too swift, and rumors might outrun them like wildfire on dry grass. Too slow, and Ned Stark's fate might be sealed in some distant city of cutthroat smiles. Jon measured every league against his father's prison walls, yet forced himself to pause at each abandoned croft or half-shuttered mill to feed and water the mare, to wrap the dragon in fresh wool, to listen for hoofbeats not their own. On the 4th night they sheltered beneath the crumbling eaves of a burned-out in whose signboard swung forlorn, the stag emblem charred to a blackened ghost. Jon stripped the mare's tack by moonlight, rubbed her legs down with melted snow, then retreated to the one corner of the taproom where charred beams still formed a crude lean-to. There, shielded from the wind, he built a meager fire in a ring of stones and laid Frostfire beside it. The dragon blinked at the flames, pupils widening, a faint croak rising deep in his throat. Jon fed him slivers of smoked mutton. Each bite vanished behind needle-sharp teeth, followed by a tiny hiss and curl of jade fire that singed the air. Ghost kept perpetual watch at the doorway, white fur silvered by moonlight, ears twitching for every rustle of wind-swept ash. Jon trusted the dire wolf more than iron bars. When at last he dozed with sword across his lap, he dreamed of shadows gliding across winter skies, great pinions blotting out stars, while distant drums beat like thunder in a frozen heart. He woke near dawn to a watchfire crackling low. Frostfire slept curled inside Jon's cloak, talons flexing now and again as dreams chased through his fledgling mind. Jon eased him free, cradling the small head in one hand, and marveled yet again at how quickly the dragon grew. Neck thicker, wingspan broader, scales glossier than when they'd left Winterfell. A week more and Frostfire would no longer fit beneath a cloak. Smoke on the horizon broke his reverie. Dark columns drifting above a stand of birches half a league to the southeast. Raiders? Soldiers? The King's Road had grown dangerous since whispers of Stark banners on the march. Jon doused his fire, saddled the mare, and, with Frostfire inside a doubled satchel slung across his chest, turned off the main track onto a narrower hunter's trail that veered west through the wood. Snow muffled their passage, and within an hour the smoke lay behind like a memory half-believed. Yet something else stirred the wind. The scent of roasting meat, the faint clang of hammer on anvil. Jon reined in at a clearing where a low hill rose above the tree line. From its crown he might spy any roadblocks ahead. He dismounted in silence, left Ghost to guard the mare, and climbed through knee-deep drift. At the crest he dropped to his belly between ferns frozen stiff as glass and peered over the ridge. Below sprawled a modest holdfast. Stone keep, round tower, stockade of felled pines, and smoke curling from every chimney. Men bustled in the yard, 36 by Jon's quick count, hauling barrels, fletching arrows, shoeing horses. Their cloaks bore device unfamiliar to him. A sable pine on snow-white field, not Karstark, nor Manderly, nor any bannerman he recalled from Winterfell's halls. Mercenaries then, or free riders lured north by talk of a gathering storm. Frostfire shifted beneath Jon's tunic, issuing a quiet chirrup. The sound carried farther than Jon liked. He backed down the slope, mindful of silhouetting himself against the brightening sky, and returned to Ghost and the mare. The echoes of hammer blows followed him like distant war drums. He would skirt wide, lose a day, and count the cost against safety. Better a weary mount than a dead dragon. 2 nights later, they reached the crossroads inn, this one intact, mildewed shutters thrown open as if to gulp what little custom winter afforded. Jon tethered the mare behind the stable, brushed loose snow from her flank, then slipped through the back door into a kitchen redolent of onions and ham. A stout cook glanced up, grunted at his coin, and ladled thick stew into a wooden bowl. Jon ate standing by the hearth, cloak still drawn tight. He avoided the taproom, voices too loud, eyes too curious, and returned to the loft above the stalls, where Frostfire could stretch amidst straw bales and the earthy warmth of horses. There, in the half-dark, he dared unwrap the dragon. Frostfire spread his wings experimentally, the membranes thin as lacquered parchment, sunlight from a cracked board painting emerald fire across every ridge of scale. Jon fed him again. The mutton supply dwindled, yet the dragon's appetite grew greedier by the hour. A soft creak of floorboards set Jon's hand to his sword. He whirled to find the stable boy frozen mid-step, pitchfork raised like a spear, eyes gone wide. Between them Frostfire hissed, smoke curling in warning. Jon raised his other hand palm outward. "Quiet," he said. "He won't harm you." The boy's voice trembled. "That a dragon?" Jon nodded. "A hatchling. You've never seen one, and you'll not speak of him outside this loft." "Understand." The boy swallowed, nodding so hard his straw-colored hair flapped. Jon eased a silver stag from his purse. "Mind the horses tonight, keep the doors latched, and forget what you saw. There's more coin if you stay silent." Small fingers snatched the coin. The boy ducked his head. "Why yes, M-Lord," and he fled down the ladder, boots clattering. Jon exhaled. Secrets thrived on trust or terror. He could not afford the latter, lest bodies begin to pile behind him. He smoothed Frostfire's frill. The dragon settled, yet those ember eyes followed the ladder long after the boy vanished. They left before dawn, though the mare flagged and Ghost's paws bled pink prints on crusted snow. The world seemed to contract into one endless ribbon of white, broken only by leafless hedgerows and frost-bitten milestones. Occasionally riders passed heading north. Dusty, road-worn men who bore stories of gathering armies, of riverlords pledging fealty to the young wolf, of Lannister outriders burning villages along the Trident. Jon offered no name, No destination, only courteous nods and empty platitudes. On the 12th day, a pale sun cracked ice clouds above the neck, and bogs unrolled like tarnished mirrors around them. The air smelt of rot and brine. Frozen reeds whispered beneath gusts. Ghost growled at shadows slithering beneath the peat. Jon wove a path along causeways scarcely wider than his shoulders, hooves clopping on warped planks, and thanked the old gods for every yard that didn't break beneath them. That night they camped atop a barrow mound, ringed by standing stones black with lichen. Jon dared a small fire, the damp air smothered sparks before they could climb, and laid out his dwindling supplies. 3 strips of smoked venison, half a heel of bread, a vial of salt. Frostfire ate 2 strips, belched smoke, and curled round Jon's boot to sleep. Jon opened a weather-stained parchment Sam had pressed into his hand the morning of departure. A simple map inked with raven quill, marking hidden trails and Night's Watch supply caches abandoned since King Aegon V. One such cache lay near the ruins of Moat Cailin, a half-day's ride east. If the barrels had not rotted, they might hold dried fish, oats, perhaps even lamp oil. Precious riches now. He slept fitfully, dreams knotted by distant screams and the rattle of chains echoing through red keep corridors. Each time he woke, frost clung to his lashes, and Frostfire's tail twitched across his throat like a living brand. The cache at Moat Cailin proved a blessing. 2 kegs of salt pork, moldy but edible after trimming, a sack of onions reduced to papery husks, and, miraculously, a leather flask of strong Dornish wine, sealed with wax long hardened. Jon thanked whatever watchman had hidden such bounty and packed what he could on the mare. Ghost tugged at a boar bone the size of Jon's forearm. Frostfire nosed the pork eagerly. Crossing the next final leagues, they reached the Fever River ford just as icy rain needled from a slate sky. Guards lounged beneath a flimsy canvas awning, Lannister crimson and gold streaming damply from a crooked spear. 2 men roused as Jon approached, hands on hilts, eyes narrow beneath dripping helms. "State your business," the taller growled. Jon bowed his head, keeping the cloak's fur tight round Frostfire. "Selling onions to camps along the Green Fork," he lied. "Need passage." The guard spat rainwater. "Tolls 2 silver stags." 2? These stones weren't worth a copper last winter. War changes prices. He tapped the spear butt. "Pay or turn around." Jon rummaged in his purse, produced 1 stag and 3 coppers. "All I have. Take it or gut me." The guard eyed the coins, then Jon's sword, then Ghost, who stood motionless yet bearing ivory fangs. A crackling breath puffed within Jon's cloak. Tiny, but the guard flinched. Perhaps he thought it thunder. He snatched the coins. "Go, and don't linger." Jon rode through, heart pounding. Only when the ford lay behind a bend of reeds did he breathe again. Inside his satchel, Frostfire chirped approval. By the 20th day, the fields of the Riverlands spread before them, battle-scarred and smoldering. Smoke plumes dotted the horizon, farms lay razed, and refugees huddled in ditches. Jon shared onion broth with a family whose 2 eldest sons had been pressed into service by Ser Gregor's men. The mother wept silent tears. The father stared hollow-eyed at nothing. Frostfire remained hidden, yet Ghost curled beside the youngest daughter, letting her braid a daisy chain through his fur. When Jon departed at dawn, he left the last of his salt pork and half the Dornish wine with him. The father gripped his arm, voice ragged with thanks, but Jon only shook his head. "Save your strength," he said. "Winter is not the worst thing coming." That afternoon horns echoed faintly from the south. War horns, their mournful bellow rolling across bare fields like thunder. Jon urged the mare up a low ridge and saw banners massing 2 leagues away. Crimson lions, golden lions, the fiery heart of Stannis men, the dire wolf of the north, all converging on a shallow vale straddling the King's Road. Distant as ants, ranks of pikemen formed hedgehog squares while horsemen wheeled in glittering arcs. The battle for the Riverlands had begun. Jon dismounted behind an outcropping of shale, heart hammering. Ned Stark might already stand condemned. Yet Robb might drive the lion back today, or die beneath his hooves. Duty warred within Jon. ride to his brother's side, or slip unseen toward the capital where a father waited in chains. He loosened the satchel, and Frostfire crawled into the daylight, sniffing war stink on the wind. The dragon's frill flared, throat pulsing green. Jon felt the call too, blood pounding, ancient as the world's first dawn. "No," he whispered. "Not yet." He stroked the scaled head. Frostfire's fire faded to a low simmer. "We ride east, little one, to the Eyrie. Lady Lisa owes father more than tears." East meant threading river crossings behind enemy lines, but also narrower roads, fewer patrols. And the Eyrie's high bond of sisterly blood might grant Ned Stark allies where crowns failed. Thus they turned their backs on battle thunder and slipped between rolling hills and thickets of burnt willow. Rain fell in sheets that night, drumming on Jon's shoulders as he hacked branches and rigged a canvas lean-to for the mare. Frostfire clung to his neck, claws pricking through leather, shivering at each thunderclap. Jon stripped off wet gloves, cupped the dragon's jaws, and drew him close to the fire. "You'll know real storms one day," he murmured, "and you'll fly above them." Morning brought clearer skies and a bitter wind that smelled faintly of the sea. They skirted villages loyal to the Tully fish, where peasants whispered of Lannister hostages and Frey treachery. At Maidenpool's shattered gates, Jon slipped past sleeping sentries, gifting one the last of his silver to ignore a cloaked rider. By dusk, the Bay of Crabs glimmered pewter beneath a waxing moon, and the shoulders of the mountains of the moon loomed jagged beyond. Ghost's ears flattened when the road narrowed into pine-shadowed switchbacks. Wolves howled far off, answered by the shriek of something larger. Frostfire's head darted from Jon's collar, eyes wide, mouth stretching in a silent challenge. Jon soothed him and pressed onward, heart rattling against ribs. 3 nights later, they reached a small mining camp perched atop a waterfall. Lanterns flickered between canvas tents. Pickaxes lay stacked by smoldering slag heaps. Jon sought shelter and a fresh horse. The foreman, a wiry man with iron dust caked into every crease of his skin, eyed Ghost warily yet named a fair price for a shaggy mountain palfrey. No coin remained in Jon's purse, so he offered his mare, saddle, and the last swig of Dornish wine sweetened by the promise of northern ambergris one day. The foreman spat in his palm. Deal struck. The palfrey proved sure-footed along goat trails that corkscrewed toward sky-piercing peaks where snow lingered year-round. Frostfire clung beneath Jon's armpit, struggling against the thin air until Jon sewed a special harness, strapping the dragon across his back like a quiver. Thus secured, Frostfire could swivel his head, wings half spread to taste mountain winds, without risking a tumble. At the gates of the bloody Mummers Pass, half-frozen Sellswords demanded a new toll. Jon's empty purse drew bored stares, until Frostfire stirred in his harness and released a gout of emerald flame that singed one man's beard to cinders. Chaos erupted. Horses reared, men cursed, and Jon spurred through while Ghost hamstrung a guard who tried to block the way. By the time arrows hissed overhead, snow swallowed their tracks. They climbed for 2 more days beneath glacial cliffs until the gates of the moon rose before them, twin towers guarding a stone-paved road that vanished among clouds. Jon dismounted out of arrowshot, smoothing wind-tangled hair, brushing travel dust from his cloak. The dragon harness he masked beneath a second cloak lined with gray wolf fur. Ghost patted at heel, hackles flat, keen ears angled at the murmurs drifting on high winds. Jon's breath emerged in misty puffs. A herald led him through curtain walls into a hall paneled with weirwood veneer. Sconces sputtered purple oil, casting shadows like fallen princes across the floor. Pale marble statues of King Jon Arryn's forebears glowered from alcoves. At the far dais, Ser Vardis Egen, broad-shouldered, silver-bearded, waited in full plate. Jon knelt before him, Ghost mirroring the motion with an almost comical dip of head. "Rise, rider," Ser Vardis said, voice echoing. "Name yourself and your business in the Vale." Jon Snow, sworn son of Lord Eddard Stark. He kept his voice calm. "I beg audience with Lady Lisa Arryn. Lord Stark's life balances on a blade. Her aid may tip the steel." Ser Vardis studied him, eyes narrowing. The lady does not grant audiences to bastards unannounced. Then announce me. Jon met the knight's gaze without flinching. She owes my father. You know it as well as I. Murmurs rustled among guards lining the walls. Ser Vardis tapped the pommel of his sword. We shall see. He gestured, and 2 knights approached to escort Jon deeper into the keep. Stone corridors spiraled upward past arrow slits that bled moonlight. At each landing, Frostfire stirred, constrained by cloaks, yet restless. Jon whispered soothing nonsense, but rage trembled beneath the dragon's scales, hot enough to warm Jon's spine. Finally, they entered the high hall, where Lady Lysa Arryn reclined upon a marble throne carved as 2 falcons' wings. She wore sky-blue silk trimmed with falcon feathers, her auburn hair braided in jewels, eyes sharp as Talon points. Beside her stood little Lord Robert, pale and sickly, his lower lip smeared with cream from some sugared treat. Lysa's voice rang brittle. Why does a Stark bastard sully my halls? Jon stepped forward. To remind you of honor, my lady. My father went to King's Landing at your behest, trusting the words in your letter. Now he lies in chains. Her fingers tightened on the armrest. I wrote only the truth. The Lannisters murdered my husband, and for speaking that truth, my father may die. Help me deliver word to Robb's host. If the Vale joins us, we can break the lion's hold before King Joffrey's coronation. Lysa laughed, sharp, too loud. Va? Here, while my son's health hangs by a breath. No, I will not expose him to steel and screams. Robert tugged her sleeve. Make the bad man fly, mother. Lysa stroked his hair. Hush, darling. She turned icy eyes to Jon. Leave the Vale, Snow. Take your northern squabbles elsewhere. Behind Jon, Ser Vardis' armor clinked ominously. Jon felt Frostfire coil tight between his shoulders, heat building. He clenched fists, breathing slow. If you will not honor blood, perhaps you will honor fear, he said quietly, and he shed the outer cloak. Gasps rippled through the hall as green-scaled wings unfurled, spanning near 4 feet tip to tip. Frostfire's head rose above Jon's shoulder, eyes burning citron, jaws yawning wide. A low roar, still more hiss than thunder, echoed from marbled columns. Heat washed over Jon's neck. Lysa recoiled, hand to her throat. Robert shrieked, scuttling behind the throne. Guards yanked blades free. Ser Vardis barked an order, but none advanced. The dragon's gaze pinned them like butterflies. I seek alliance, not blood, Jon said, voice calm though his heart hammered like a smith's anvil. Yet this creature will not be caged forever. Side with us and he will guard the Vale's skies. Remain craven, and when lions put you in chains, recall the moment you turned away the north and its fire. Silence hung thick. Frostfire's wings beat once, stirring flags overhead. Lysa swallowed, eyes darting. A dragon has not flown these lands since Aegon IV. He flies now. Jon extended an arm. Frostfire climbed to his gloved wrist, claws sinking into leather. Even half-grown, he looked every inch a predator. Talons black glass, frill-spined, tail lashing. And he grows. Ser Vardis stepped to the throne's side, whispering. Lysa listened, lips thin, face blanched. When she spoke, her voice trembled. Return at dawn. I will consider your plea. Jon inclined his head. My thanks. He pivoted, cloak swirling, and strode from the hall. Behind him, Frostfire crooned a soft note, half lullaby, half threat. The echo lingered long after the doors shut. He lodged that night in a solar high above the gates of the moon. A brazier glowed dimly. Outside, wind clawed roofing slates. Frostfire prowled the rafters, occasionally diving to snatch moths drawn by lamplight. Ghost dozed by the door. Jon scribbled letters by candle stub. One to Robb, pledging Vale aid if granted. One to Sam, detailing routes for Secret Raven FL. Aites. One to Maester Luwin, begging counsel on rapid dragon growth. When at last he slept, He dreamt of a vast courtyard atop the airy sky cells where Frostfire soared in widening circles, wings casting emerald shadows upon white marble. Men in Aaron blue knelt while a direwolf-browed king raised a sword wreathed in green flame. Snow fell upward in that dream, and the moon bled bright across the clouds. Dawn came thin and pale. Jon descended through chill corridors to the same high hall, now lit rosy by sunrise. Lisa Arryn waited, alone but for Ser Vardis and a half-dozen knights. Her gown today bore white falcons upon silver thread. Frostfire perched on Jon's shoulder, preening. The lady's lips pressed thin. "I will send 100 knights to Riverrun under my own banners," she announced, voice brittle. "But the Vale remains neutral otherwise. Our gates close at first blood." It was less than Jon hoped, more than he feared. 100 knights may tip the River Lords back to our side," he said. "I accept." "And the dragon," Lisa added, gaze flicking to Frostfire, "will remain with you, far from my son." "As you wish." Jon bowed. Frostfire's tail wrapped his wrist like living ivy. Outside the castle, the palfrey stamped impatiently. Snow began to fall, delicate flakes drifting in lazy spirals. Jon vaulted to the saddle, ghost trotting ahead. He fixed his eyes west, where the riverlands smoldered and stark banners rallied. A war waited, and a dragon's wings beat faster each dawn. Frostfire launched into the air above him, climbing on a cold updraft, green scales igniting beneath the sun. He wheeled once, twice, then settled upon Jon's gloved arm. The weight felt heavier than steel, yet lighter than destiny. Jon whispered, "Fly soon, my friend. The world is ready or not." Frostfire answered with a shriek that sent ravens scattering from the watchtower spires. Somewhere beyond sight, lions roared and wolves answered, but neither knew yet that fire had joined the howl. They turned their backs on the lofty peaks and began the long descent toward war, toward chains waiting to break, toward songs not yet sung, songs of ice and of fire, wound now into a single stride of hoof, paw, and wing. Snow stung Jon's eyes as he guided the palfrey down the switchbacks beneath the eyrie, a fine, needling flurry blown sideways on knifing gusts that scoured every ledge. Each hoof placement mattered. One misstep meant a 1,000-foot plunge into cloud-swallowed ravines, yet the palfrey picked her way with mountain-bred surety. Frostfire rode the air above like an emerald kite, wings extending wider by the week, banking effortlessly on updrafts before gliding back to alight upon Jon's arm whenever the path narrowed beneath overhanging crags. The dragon's growing weight tugged Jon's shoulder toward the drop, but he bore it gladly. There was pride in the ache, pride and the promise of destiny. By dusk they reached the high road's last way castle. Smoke curled from its chimney, and lanterns winked in narrow slits. No banners flew, too risky, with Lannister outriders rumored as near as the Red Fort. Jon sheltered in the gatehouse while Frostfire hunted among wind-twisted pines, snatching mountain hares with sizzling bursts of green flame. Ghost trotted the battlements, white shape half ghostly in snowlight, startling sentries who scarce believed their eyes. During a supper of barley gruel and black bread, the Waycastle steward, a gaunt veteran missing 2 fingers, approached Jon's bench. He bowed stiffly, eyeing the direwolf curled at Jon's boots. "Beg pardon, M-Lord," he rasped. "Word from the Bloody Gate. Lannister scouts patrol the lower pass, burning farms loyal to Arryn and Tully. They'll ride north come thaw." Jon touched Frostfire's warm scales beneath his cloak. "Let them ride," he said. "Steel breaks before fire." The steward squinted, uncertain, but nodded and withdrew. That night Jon dreamed of towers wreathed in emerald fire, of stone melt weeping under dragon heat, of sisters crying joy and terror on the walls as a second dawn blossomed from the beast's jaws. He woke slick with sweat despite the cold, Frostfire draped across his chest like a velvet brand, tiny heart beating quick as a hammer on tin. They descended from the foothills into rolling green where spring already gnawed at winter's edges. Riverrun lay 2 weeks' ride west. Jon meant to skirt the Riverland's main roads, relying on disused shepherd tracks and the unmarked courses smugglers favored. At night, he studied Sam's map by starlight, tracing crooked lines that meandered between mill ponds and standing stones older than the Seven. Frostfire ranged farther, chasing geese above flooded meadows, returning each dusk with talons dripping marsh water and feathers smoldering in his jaws. One evening, pitched beneath a ruined sept whose rose window gaped star-pricked sky, Jon heard hooves splashing through reeds. He doused his fire and crouched behind a moss-slick buttress. Ghost melted into shadow. Frostfire clung silent to the ruined spire, scales blending with lichen-clad stone. A column of riders emerged. 8 men in tarnished mail, half their spears snapped short. They bore no standard, but their leader wore a blackened breastplate too fine for brigands. His voice carried, "Search the nave, strip the altar. The lion pays silver for any cup not nailed fast." Looters, then soldiers once, perhaps, now feral on war's margins. Jon drew Longclaw a handspan, letting moonlight kiss Valyrian ripples before he slid it back. Steel might silence 1 or 2, but 8 would ring the night with screams. Better smoke and claw. He whistled low. Frostfire answered with a diving shriek. Green fire scored the nave, igniting rafters abandoned to rot. The lead rider's horse reared, pitching its master beneath shattering beams. Ghost exploded from gloom, hamstringing the nearest looter. Jon charged from his cover, cloak flaring. The remaining raiders stumbled, some trying to aim quarrels skyward, others frozen in awe of the living conflagration swooping overhead. Jon cut the first across the collarbone, parried a wild axe swing, reversed, and opened a belly through patched leather. Panic broke them. Survivors bolted into reeds. Jon let them go, word of a northern ghost and his dragon would serve nearly as well as their deaths. The fire consumed half the sept roof before frost-wet timbers snuffed it. Jon dragged the moaning leader clear of falling beams. The man's visor lay twisted, eyes saucer-wide at the dragon circling like a comet. "Tell your masters," Jon said, voice low but carrying. "Winterfell's fire rides the rivers now." He pressed the man's purse. Lion-stamped silvers jingled, and flung it into the blaze. Greed for gold draws only ashes. He left the raiders whimpering amid smoke, Frostfire settling to his shoulder in triumph, scales alight with ember smuts. Ghost regarded the dragon warily but gave a soft chuff of acceptance. Pack, yet stranger, yet kin. Riverrun's siege towers rose from mist like black teeth. Red and blue trout banners snapped beneath lion standards that ringed the fortress in a sprawl of pavilions. Fires dotted the siege lines, too many to count, while battering rams loomed half-built near the eastern curtain wall. Jon crouched on a wooded ridge, spyglass trained on the scene. Lannister crimson encamped west, Frey green to the north, and between them stark gray encircled by smaller pockets of Riverlord colors. Robb's host had pierced the lion's lines but not broken them. Both armies now interlocked in a deadly clasp about Riverrun's throat. Jon's heart surged at the direwolf banners ruffled by dawn breeze. Home colors, home blood. He sheathed the glass and descended the slope. Ghost bounded ahead. Frostfire glided low over coppice woods, silent save for the rustle of budding leaves beneath his shadow. Approaching the Stark lines, Jon was halted by outriders. Tall Karstark men in soot-dark mail, armbands dyed wolf gray. Their captain blinked at Jon's shabby cloak and swore at the sight of Ghost. "7 save me. Another white beast? If you're kin to Lord Robb, speak it quick." Jon threw back his hood. Jon Snow of Winterfell. He lifted Longclaw's wolf pommel in token. "Send word to the king." They ushered him through muddy trenches to a pavilion of rough-spun wool. Inside, Robb stood over a map table, Catelyn at his side, Great Jon Umber and Roose Bolton flanking. Torches guttered, casting giant shadows. When Robb saw Jon, surprise cracked his war mask. He crossed the rugs in 3 strides, crushing Jon against leather and mail. "What madness brings you south?" he breathed. "I feared you rode to the wall again." Jon hugged him hard, then stepped back. "I carry more than madness, brother." He unlaced the cloak clasps. Frostfire fluttered to the tense ridgepole with a shriek, spreading wings nearly 8 feet across. Sparks dripped from his jaws onto damp canvas, sizzling. Robb staggered. Catelyn gasped, hand to heart. Great Jon swore loud enough to wake the dead. Jon raised both palms. A dragon, yes, hatched beneath Winterfell, bound to me. He offers firepower the lion cannot match. Catelyn found her voice first, thin and sharp. Dark magic, Jon. Dragons answer only Targaryen blood. Perhaps my blood answers both North and Valyria, Jon said. We debate lineage later, war waits now. Roose Bolton's pale eyes gleamed. A single WYRM might turn siege engines to slag. Robb recovered, awe hardening to strategy. Could he breach the Frey barricades at the stone bridge? Their scorpions keep our rams at bay. Frostfire's hide shrugs quarrels, Jon replied, though in truth he had never yet tested steel against those scales. Give him clear sky and a target. Great Jon clapped gauntlets. By the giant's dark, let the beast feast. Catelyn's lips pressed to a thin line. Fear, grief, calculation. Jon met her gaze, steady. This war began with Ned Stark's honor, he said softly. We end it with Stark blood unbroken. She looked away. A single tear tracked her cheek before she wiped it hard. Do what men must, she whispered. Night cloaked the camps in hush broken by distant hammers and the occasional scream of a horse-smelling lion. Clouds rumbled, threatening storm. Jon stood with Robb atop a wooden watchtower overlooking the river barrens. Frostfire perched on the thick rail, talons gouging splinters. Strike at the western catapults, Robb said, pointing. When they burn, our vanguard will storm the breach along the river gate. Ser Bryndon's sortie will meet us halfway. Jon nodded, adjusting the new harness crafted by Stark smiths. Boiled leather, steel rings, and a double loop to secure thighs behind the dragon's shoulders. It felt untested, absurdly frail compared to Frostfire's power. Yet his limbs knew horses and swords. They would learn wings. Are you ready? Robb asked, voice hushed. No, Jon admitted, but we were never ready for any of this. They clasped forearms, brother to brother, lord to lord. Trust the wolf and trust the flame. Robb grinned, sudden and fierce. Show the South what winter's fire means. Jon climbed the tower's bracing until he stood beside Frostfire's withers. The dragon angled his head, golden eyes meeting Jon's. No words passed, only a pulse of shared intent. Jon swung astride, legs clamping the warm trunk of the beast's body. Wind whipped his hair as Frostfire unfurled wings with a crack of canvas. Men below gasped. Jon glimpsed Catelyn's pale face between torches, Theon's slack jaw, Arya's memory. He shouted one word, fly, though Frostfire had no need of commands. The dragon leapt, beating air with thunderous strokes. The tower fell away. Campfires became flickering embers. The river a silver snake far below. Jon's stomach lurched, but exhilaration drowned fear. They banked west into blackness. The moon slipped behind storm clouds, leaving only star sparks on Frostfire's wings. Yet the camps ahead glowed with torchlight, perfect beacons. Jon tightened his knees and leaned forward. There, he whispered. Flap by mighty flap, Frostfire gained altitude until siege towers looked like playthings. Jon felt the dragon's chest expand, heat building beneath scale and hide. A furnace stoked. He braced. Emerald flame roared from Frostfire's jaws, a torrent that lit night green gold. Catapults vanished in conflagration. Pitch barrels erupted like gory fireworks. Men ran screaming, outlines black against neon embers. Frostfire wheeled, belched a second blast along the barricade. Timber sagged, puddling molten nails. Arrows hissed upward, but most burned to ash before finding scale. The few that struck pinged harmlessly. Below, Stark horns blared. The signal. Robb's infantry surged, shields up, direwolf banners streaming. From Riverrun's Sallyport, Blackfish Tully led knights in a wedge of steel, spears leveled. The Frey lines buckled. Frostfire dove again, razoring wind. Jon loosed Longclaw overhead, rallying the men with starlight on Valyrian steel. Cheers rose beneath roaring fire. A sudden snap jerked Jon sideways, the harness strap seared through by his own mount's heat. He clutched Frostfire's neck, fingers curling under ridged scales. The world whipped in sickening spiral. A heavy quarrel thunked into the dragon's left wing joint. Frostfire screeched, banking hard. Jon saw the shooter, a scorpion atop a battered tower by the river ford, crew scrambling to load again. "Turn," Jon urged. Frostfire responded, but the wing beat stuttered, bleeding altitude. Jon's mind raced. Land near friendly lines or press? The dragon answered by diving straight for the scorpion, flames sputtering at first, then surging as pain mixed with fury. The bolt thrower vanished in a starburst. Gunners leapt into icy water, armor steaming. But the wound bled thick, dark ichor, and Frostfire's flaps grew ragged. Jon guided him toward a copse behind stark shields. They landed hard, skidding through churned mud. Jon tumbled free, rolling to absorb impact. Frostfire folded wings, crouched, growling at the barb embedded near the shoulder joint. Jon sprang, blade sawing through straps of the ruined harness, then knelt beside the wound. The coral head jutted deep. "Hold, boy!" He gripped the shaft and pulled. Frostfire roared. Heat blasted Jon's face, singeing beard. The bolt came free in a gout of blood and steam. Jon pressed torn cloak against the hole, whispering soothing words, ignoring the battle din. Gray winds sliced overhead. Robb's direwolf standard charging with infantry. Lannister horns faltered. The Fry Bridge collapsed under flaming debris. Blackfish's knights linked with Robb's shield wall. By dawn, lion banners lay trampled in river mud. Their soldiers routed north toward the Twins. Riverrun's gates opened to roar welcome, but victory tasted of iron. Field surgeons labored at lines of groaning men, and Frostfire lay on his side, breath wheezing. Maester Vyman of Riverrun knelt with poultices of honey wine and powdered horn, normally used on horses. "We'll try," he muttered, wide-eyed at scales that dulled beneath his touch. Jon hovered, heart tightening each time the dragon shuddered. The sun crested, spilling gold across the ruined siege works. Robb found Jon by the makeshift pen where Frostfire rested under canvas. "Brother," Robb said softly, "the battle is ours. Yet the war goes on." Jon kept eyes on the dragon's chest, rising shallow. "And my dragon may die before fighting again." Robb set a hand on Jon's shoulder. "He lives still. So do you. We move with dawn tomorrow. Edmure will hold Riverrun while we march east to Harrenhal. If you and your dragon can fly by then, join us. If not, follow with the baggage." Jon nodded, throat tight. Robb squeezed his shoulder once more and departed, war pulling at him like a tide. Night in Riverrun's stable yard was a symphony of coughing men, wickering horses, and distant river lapping stone. Jon lay cloak-wrapped beside Frostfire, palm resting on fevered scales. Ghost curled at the dragon's forelimb, eyes half-closed yet watchful. Torches guttered low. Maester Vyman returned hourly, applying salves that hissed when they touched the wound. The night smelled of blood, vinegar, and ash. Near midnight, Frostfire stirred, eyelids cracking. A thin wine-dark membrane surfaced, then withdrew, revealing pupils that focused on Jon. The dragon uttered a faint, keening note. Jon leaned close. "Easy. Rest." Yet Frostfire's head butted Jon's chest. Wings twitched. Understanding flared. The dragon sought sky. Instinct fought pain. Flight meant life. Jon fetched a length of chainmail and leather strips, fashioned a new harness that looped under the belly and over the chest, avoiding the wound. He buckled it gently while Frostfire watched. Outside, clouds shredded to reveal a gibbous moon. Jon led the dragon to the courtyard. Guards staggered back, making the sign of the seven. Frostfire spread wings, rippling moonjade. The first beat was weak, the second stronger. Jon jogged, releasing slack in the lead. At the third beat, Frostfire leapt, talons scraping cobble. Jon released the rope and watched the dragon mount the wind, silhouette painted silver. Up he climbed until moonlight set wounded wing agleam. Jon held breath. Frostfire circled once, twice, then vanished beyond the tower's crown, a phantom borne by sky's black ocean. When gray dawn whispered, the dragon returned, landing beside Jon with a rattle of tile and flutter of soot. Fresh blood crusted where the wound wept, but the eye's fire burned brighter. Frostfire nudged Jon's shoulder, then disgorged a fat sprawl of half-charred trout. Prey fished from the tumblestone. Jon laughed, tears stinging salt. "My thanks," he whispered, stroking scale. Life pulsed beneath. At first light, stark banners rolled east. Jon rode a chestnut destrier beside Roose Bolton's flankers, Frostfire circling above like a living standard. Lannister stragglers fled before them, villages through open granaries, and Frey scouts melted from hedgerows rather than test dragon fire. Harrenhal's black spires soon loomed, a twisted monument blistered by ancient dragons yet still squatting on the riverlands like a curse. Robb convened war council in a charred banquet hall where ceilings dripped condensation like cold tears. Bolton urged a feint north to lure Tywin, while Great Jon clamored to storm the fortress outright.
Caitlin argued for prisoner exchanges, Jaime for ned.
Jon offered a third path: fly over the walls at dusk, land in the godswood within, and open the main gate from inside. Bolton's brow arched. Storm-born folly. Better folly than siege, Jon shot back. Harrenhal's stones swallow men. Robb weighed options, thumb-tapping map. Risky, yet lions expect rams at gates, not dragons in their courtyard. We try it. Night turned Harrenhal molten black. Jon mounted Frostfire beyond torch range, secured swords at back and waist, whispered a promise into scaled ear. They rose between chimneys belching ghost smoke. Wind tugged at tattered banners strung between cracked towers. Inside the shell keep, lights flickered, kitchens working late, forge smoke drifting. Jon spotted patrols along the inner curtain, torches at intervals, crossbows slung. He guided Frostfire into a shallow dive, skimming treetops of the inner godswood. Branches whipped at wings, leaves rustled burnt copper. They alighted in a clearing ringed by weirwood saplings long since blighted. Trunk holes gaped like mouths screaming silent. Jon slid free, knees buckling under sudden weightlessness. Ghost sprinted ahead, scenting the air. Two Lannister guards approached along gravel path, cursing chill. Jon stepped from shadow, long claw streaking silver. One fell headless. The other managed a strangled shout before Ghost's jaws crushed his throat. Jon dragged bodies beneath thorn bushes. A stair spiraled toward the gatehouse. Jon climbed, Frostfire following silent save for claws scraping stone. At the final turn, a guard lounged half asleep beside the winch. Jon pressed dagger under the man's chin. Steel parted flesh. Frostfire seized the corpse, hauling it into darkness. Jon grasped the lever and heaved. Chains rattled, portcullis groaned. Outside, Starkhorns answered, a rising ululation like wolves greeting moon. Gates burst inward, Northmen flooding the yard. Karstark pikes, Mormont spears, Umber axes. Lannister defenders scrambled, but chaos reigned. Frostfire swept overhead, breath scorching barracks wherein archers fumbled torches. Flames leapt hungry. Jon fought alongside Robb at hall doors, Longclaw dancing through red and gold cloaks. Every step forward felt predestined, as though some invisible thread drew him toward Harren's massive central tower. Flames licked its base but could not mar stone already melted centuries ago by Balerian's black fire. Ghost bounded the stairs two at a time. Jon followed. On the tower's topmost floor, they found a makeshift cell. Iron bars blocked a small chamber. Within, a bearded man sat shackled hand and foot. His head lifted at the commotion, gray eyes narrowing. Ned Stark, weathered, gaunt, but alive. "Father," Jon breathed. Heavy iron key snatched from a dead jailer turned the lock with reluctant click. Jon swung the grate aside and knelt, tears hot on wind-burned cheeks. Ned cupped his son's face with trembling hands. "The gods were kind," Ned whispered. "I dreamed of a white wolf and green fire. It was no dream." Jon slashed fetters, easing him to his feet. Ghost whined, pressing muzzle into Ned's thigh. Outside, Frostfire shrieked triumph, wings illumined by moon's pale blaze through shattered roof tiles. Ned leaned on Jon's shoulder, limping down smoke-laden stairs. At each landing, Stark men bowed, eyes shining at their lord returned. In the yard, Robb spied them and choked a sob before folding his father in embrace. Torches reflected in tears sliding grime-cut trenches down Robb's cheeks. Harrenhal fell that night, its horror-soaked halls echoing new songs. Songs of direwolf vengeance and dragon wrath. Tywin's host scattered east, and riverlords bent knee anew. Yet greater storms brewed beyond. In King's Landing, a boy king gilded with cruelty sat the Iron Throne. In Dragonstone, Stannis raised fiery banners beneath a red woman's whispers. Across the narrow sea, another dragon queen nursed hatchlings of her own. The reunited Stark host camped beneath Harrenhal's mooncast ruins. Jon sat by the water-filled fissure once scorched by Aegon's breath, watching Frostfire soak aching wing in cool depths. Maester Vyman pronounced the wound healing, scar tissue knitting into jade-black callus. Ned joined Jon, lowering stiffly to the riverbank. Silence stretched companionable. Finally Ned spoke. "Your mother," he faltered, swallowed. "There are truths I kept too long." Jon held breath. Frostfire's reflection rippled emerald across the pool. Ned's gaze followed the dragon. "Targaryen blood courses in your veins, Jon. Lyanna's blood." He drew a folded scrap from jerkin, a withered lily pressed between parchment. "She bore a son in secret, to protect him from Robert's wrath. I swore to guard you as my own." Jon's world tipped. Memories crashed. Kat's distant eyes, Ned's unspoken pains, the egg calling through stone, all coiled into one revelation. He stared at the flower a long while, then at Frostfire. The dragon raised his head, as though recognizing and unmasking older than both of them. "So I am both wolf and dragon," Jon said softly. "Wolf's blood will guide your honor, Dragonfire your strength." Ned clasped his son's hand. "Do not forsake either." Jon nodded, tears unshed, purpose crystallized. End the war, unite ice and fire, forge a realm where secrets no longer bred sorrow. Across camp, robins trilled dawn's approach. Robb planned march to King's Landing within a fortnight. Edmure rallied supply trains. Catelyn penned letters to every wavering lord. Above them all, Frostfire stretched vast wings, morning sun threading membranes gold-green. When he launched skyward, his shadow swept a legion of men, some cheering, some cowering, all feeling the flutter of history. Jon watched until the dragon became a moat against cloud. He touched Longclaw's pommel, cold under glove, then the lily, fragile yet enduring. In that moment he understood. Winter had birthed fire, and fire would melt chains of ice, yet from both new steel must be forged. He rose, drawing strength from the swirl of scales aloft and the steady heartbeat beside him, ready to stride into whatever songs the bards would one day weave of wolves, dragons, and the bastard who was both. The story of a dragon egg found beneath Winterfell's crypts had only just begun, and though the tale would darken before it blazed, Jon Snow felt the furnace in his blood answering the sky's wide call. A promise etched in flame across the cold heart of the world.